Hey guys, welcome to From Corner to Corner podcast. We're back here on the YouTube channel again with another interview. And tonight we are with independent wrestler out of Texas, Danny Saint. Danny, how
What's
you
up,
doing
guys?
tonight?
Good.
I see you're wearing a Rams jersey. It was a good
It
day
was
for
a
you today.
stressful day. I didn't watch any of the game because it just seems every time they're ahead, if I turn it on, they end up choking. So like if I'm watching front beginning to end, it's fine. But if they're ahead, just for whatever reason, every time I turn it on, they end up choking it away, which they almost did today.
Yeah.
But like I had errands to run today too. So like I was at the grocery store and it was like 20-3 and guys were like, "Hey, Rams about to get that W." I was like, "Dude, they got plenty of time to throw this thing away, man."
Hey,
I
they're playing
I saw it
Tom
2 weeks
Brady.
ago.
Tom Brady
Yeah,
with
Brady's
no
a different
leader
machine in the
protect-
playoffs, man.
Right.
They're like, "Well, they already beat them earlier this season." I was like, "Brady in the playoffs." When the Rams made the Super Bowl, they're like, "Oh, I think the Rams got." I was like, "Brady's not losing 2 Super Bowls in a row, man, because they had just lost to the Eagles a year before." It's like he's not losing 2 in a row, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I love the Rams, but it's not happening.
Well, and now they got to figure out how to beat the 49ers for the first time.
No kidding, man. That's the
So,
last matchup I wanted.
yeah, for sure.
Packers didn't do me any favors last night.
Definitely not. Well, awesome. Well, Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am born and raised right outside of Dallas in Forney, where's that, Texas, as my pastor used to say, and been wrestling for 16 years now.
Nice.
I've lost count. Yeah, and kind of I feel like I'm known around Texas. But yeah, I've been doing it 16 years minus maybe 2 in the middle. Like every wrestler retires at some point and then comes back. Yeah, just still living that teenage dream. Be 38 next week, so see how much longer I got.
Now,
my wife gets mad at me, but I always say I don't see her letting me do it past 40. But she's like, I don't dictate what you do, but yeah, I don't see it happening past 40. But who knows?
Now, tell us some of the promotions that you're working with, Danny.
The main one right now is Global Wrestling Federation in Haltom City in Dallas. It's the same as the old days. The name anyway, and it's the booker has permission to use it by the guys that owned it back then. And there's Christian Wrestling Federation here in like just down the road from where I live. I've been doing that for about 3 years, and then just a bunch of spontaneous spot shows here and there around Texas. I'm only working maybe once or twice a month these days.
Yeah. So this is like your weekend side hobby, definitely not the full-time gig thing.
Yeah. You get heat for calling it a hobby, but I mean, it's pocket money at this point. I get paid decently these days, but yeah, it's not paying any bills. It pays for gas maybe.
Yeah.
Which I'm not ashamed to say that. I mean, that's indie wrestling.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like playing minor league baseball. I mean, you got to do you got to do the grind and the time there to eventually, hopefully, get that payoff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what made you a fan of wrestling way back
Man,
when?
I turned it on one day, and when I was can't remember how old, I got my own TV in my room, first grade, second grade, but I just turned it on, and it's like, wow, this is pretty awesome. Hulk Hogan someone was jobbing to him on television, and I watched it sporadically, and then as I got into my teens, I was really, really addicted. And then watching WrestleMania 13 was where I really decided, yeah, I kind of want to do this. I want to try this when I'm of age. Watching Bret and Austin, I was like, yeah, that's because Bret was my guy. So I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna attempt this at some point in my life. I didn't start till 22. I wish I would have started like kind of right out of high school, but
Right.
Life happens. I didn't know the proper channels to get into it, and once I finally decided to, I was 22.
Now, being from Texas, were you ever a world-class fan?
I mean, it was already done by the
Right.
time I really started branching out into anything other than WWF. It was already done. But guys I work with now don't shut up about it.
Yeah.
I go back and watch because I knew Skandor Akbar really well when I first started. I would train at his building. He wasn't my trainer, but on the days his class wasn't training, my trainer would train me there. So yeah, I got to know Ak really well. So yeah, I would go back and watch a lot of the stuff he was involved in.
Now I'm an old school guy at heart.
Yeah.
Sean will tell you, I love old school wrestling. There's nothing like old school wrestling.
Yeah, me too, man.
It hasn't been the same in years. It not knocking the product at all. It's just not like it was. Man, that world class. Of course, I guess I'm naturally a heel guy. The Freebirds and the Von Erichs. People don't. I mean, there's not that kind of stuff, and it's probably a good thing because we couldn't do those kind of things now.
Yeah. That's you try to be a heel like they were back then. Lord knows what'll happen.
Well, I mean, we used to watch that. What was that show called? The Biography on A&E, and Roddy Piper's biography, and he talks about the time in San Diego where he played La Cucaracha on the bagpipes as a song to ask for forgiveness for beating up the Guerreros. And it's a song about a cockroach. and he was like, I actually thought I might have got killed before I could get to the back. There's just guys aren't able to get heat like that.
Well, remember when Brock and Eddie were feuding, Brock came out there in a sombrero and was dancing around with a mariachi band. And that was, what was that, 02, 01?
Yeah.
I can't remember what year that was. And then, but even as far as back then they were doing that, and I don't think you can get away with that now.
Right. Everything's changed so much.
The culture's a little softer now, I guess you would say. But that was the kind of stuff that, when they were a heel all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and like MJF is probably the closest thing to that right now. He lives the character all the time.
Yeah. I remember Jericho saying when he was a heel, his last heel run at WWE, like he hated having to be as bad as he was. Like he'd be in an elevator with fans and like he wouldn't even acknowledge them because he was trying to do the old school heel thing. When you're a heel, you're a heel. I had a promoter back in 2010 I worked for down in San Antonio. And he was like, if you're a heel and you're going out there after the show, because we would all go out there, it's like, if you're signing an autograph, you better be charging $5 for it. Because we had this little girl that would give cookies to us after every show. And he's like, if you're a heel, you better smash those cookies on the ground right in front of her. Like he was the last really old school promoter that was really, like, hey, you're a heel, you're a heel. You don't want them cheering for you.
Right. So,
which I get.
Right, absolutely. So being in Texas, we know about the hotbed of wrestling that comes from Texas. How did you specifically get into the business?
I had gone to Survivor Series in 03. It was at the Airline Center. I can't remember if it was the Airline Center or Union Arena back then. I think it was the Airline Center. And the next day I went to the gym and I had a Goldberg shirt on that I had purchased there that night. And there's this guy there named Action Jackson who I knew who he was because he was a local wrestler, but I'd never really ever talked to him. I just saw him around. I didn't know how to act around wrestlers back then. I was, I think, 19 or 20 at the time.
Right.
And he came up to me, saw my shirt. It's like, hey, did you go to that last night? We got to talking, and then we were friends, and we became friends. And then it was about 2 years later where I was like, all right, man, because he kept offering me, hey, if you want me to start training, you train. He was telling me the price and everything, and I was like, man, I don't know if I can really do that at this point. But then one day I just finally said, yeah, I train me. So in days Akbar wasn't training his class, I was at Akbar's place being trained by Action Jackson, who he didn't do a lot for WCW. He was in a team called the Blackbirds at one point. He was very low level WCW when he was there. I don't think he was there very long though.
Nice. Well, I mean, and it's funny. You hear those stories a lot, in the business, is that you just happen to be at the gym and there was a wrestler. Yeah. It's like, hey, how do I get into it? And that's kind of how those conversations organically start a lot of times.
Yeah.
So
because there's this promotion, PCW, here in Arlington, and it would air on a local channel on Saturday mornings, and I saw him on there. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Action Jackson from PCW, and sure enough, it was.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about if somebody were to watch Danny Saint in the ring, what can they expect to see?
Kind of a bruiser. I'm not a fan of the flashy, flippy stuff, as you know, I'm censoring it as other people call it. Yeah, I'm straightforward. I'm there to fight, you know. I'm there to entertain, but also I want people to know, hey, I'm here to fight. I'm here to hurt this person. And
Sounds like Stone Cold fan.
Yeah, a little bit. I get labeled. I was labeled early on when I first started doing that, like, you know, because when you're young, you want to be the fanciest guy out there. And then once I transitioned to just going out there and wrestling, I got labeled as boring at first, and then as years going on, everyone was like, "Oh, not to toot my own horn, he kind of knows what he's doing in there," you know.
You know, one of my favorite, you talked about being boring. One of my favorite stories was Mick Foley talking about when he was in ECW and how the ECW, it was an independent promotion that just caught fire, right? And the fans were unlike any fans probably before and probably any fan base since. AEW might be one of GCW probably is the closest thing to ECW fan base now, but that they got so bloodthirsty that they would start like booing guys if they weren't having these extreme hardcore bloody matches. And then the time that the sign got brought that said Kane Dewey, of course, Dewey was his son. And he set out for months to have the most boring matches that he could, like locking headlocks for like 5 and 10 minutes. And it's just amazing that you see a guy like Mick Foley and you know how he goes about his business, that he intentionally made his matches boring. So you know, what about your style? And I say all that to ask this question: what about your style did you think made the crowd assume that you were boring?
I'm a call it in the ring guy.
Okay.
That's how I was trained, and then, you know, I can call a match backstage. It's not a big deal, but I'm gonna call it in the ring, and you know, most of the time that's pretty simple stuff. But I feel like I execute the things you can call out there pretty well. And you know, I've you know, I'll say it, I've never done a backflip ever. You know, I've never attempted a moonsault because it's just not the style I want to do. You know, I've been feeling kind of froggy lately, like in my later ages. So, you know, I've been getting more and more kind of active, I guess you could say, in the ring. I still haven't attempted it, but I've thought of scenarios for future matches that have been talked about. It's like, I could maybe bust something out, like maybe bust a moonsault or something. Because I'm confident I can do it. It's just I never have. It's just not me. It doesn't feel like me.
Right.
You know, I'll do shoulder block. I'll go up to the top and do shoulder block, you know, splash, headbutt. But, you know, yeah, the flipping stuff, it's just, I don't feel like it fits me.
Right. Well, and I mean, you know, I don't know that I've ever seen Steve Austin do much more than an elbow drop off the second rope. I don't know that I've ever seen him on the top rope.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's had a pretty successful career.
Yeah. Everyone talks about he was punch kick stunner. Hogan was punch kick, leg drop. I was like, that's fine. You know, you're not wrong, but those are two of the biggest superstars in the industry that's ever been. You know, like they were doing something right.
Right.
You know, and I'm obviously nowhere near those two, but like that's just kind of the mentality. I was like, the less is more is what I was always taught. And
well, and you know, and we talk on our show often. The thing about Hogan and Austin and even Cena, you know, that Cena gets labeled with the 5 moves of doom. And it's even with all that, they're such good storytellers. So it doesn't matter if your skill set is on, you know, punch, kick, leg drop. If you can get the fans invested and caring, you don't need to do, you know, moonsaults and suicide dives and you know all this stuff, because what you're doing is simple and it's working. And also your skill set leads to you to be able to work with anybody. Because
and while most of the stuff that's out there available to watch of me, like, is face, like, I've been a heel most of the time in my career, and like I'm there to make the face look good,
Right.
So like, what is me doing that stuff to that person, doing for him, I'm not the guy that's like, hey, make me look good, I've been heel most of the time, so I'm like, hey, I'm here to make you look good, especially now in my later years, not on in my late 30s, and if I'm in there a younger guy, I'm like, hey, I'm here to make you look good.
Right. So jumping off of that right there, you said a while ago that you like to call the matches in the ring. Are you the one that normally calls the matches?
I try to be. If someone else wants to take the reins of that I'm working with, yeah, go for it. And
Is it
if it's not going well, I'll step in.
Yeah. Is it easier to call the match as a heel, or does it really matter?
I don't think it really matters. I think heel is overall easier, just in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like it's easier just to call.
Yeah. I would think so too, because
I was taught you feed off of the crowd. So
Right.
like, if you have a whole thing planned and they're not eating it up, then hey, it's something audible.
yeah, you have to cheat or poke them in the eye or pull
Yeah.
something to get the emotion into it. And one of the big things that we always talk about on our shows is emotion, because like in I'll say television wrestling, okay, because we know there's two different worlds. There's independent wrestling, and then there's television wrestling, or sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it. They've lost the ability, WWE mainly, to be able to pull emotion from their fans. AEW does a great job with that, like with their entrance songs. A lot of these guys have entrance songs that everybody in the stands
I know,
knows the words to.
that's one of my favorite parts of AEW is Tony Khan is just paying for the rights to use it.
Right.
I wish more people would do that.
Yeah, like Moxley coming out to Wild Thing. I mean, Wild
Yeah.
Thing has been popular for 40
Yeah.
years. So
Jungle Boy, I love Jungle Boys. It's like, who'd have thought that song would ever pop anybody? But here it is. I popped the first time I heard him come out to it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a big fan of those guys. And so we went to WrestleCade. Are you familiar with WrestleCade?
Yes, yes.
So we went to WrestleCade in 2019. It was the first time. And we went back this year. Unfortunately, we didn't get to go in 2020 because of, right. What. And the one thing that we caught on to both times that we've been there is these independent guys are giving it everything they've got, and the crowds are going crazy. The heels do an excellent job of making the fans mad, and the faces know exactly how to pull the emotion out of it. And that's why we like literally, when I say we're entwined into this indie wrestling right now, that's all we're doing. Yeah. All we're talking to is indie wrestlers. We're talking to some independent promotions about trying to be their official podcast. That's the guys we want to talk to, because we're not going to get a Brock Lesnar to come on to our show, and that's not what we want. We want to hear, the guys that are fighting their way up through the ranks. That's why we want to talk to you guys. And
because you can hear the passion, you can hear the passion they have for it too, which, yes. No offense to any WWE superstars, but like, you listen to an interview with them and you kind of like, yeah, they're talking about their stories and their, everything they've been through, but like, there's no passion there. Like, if I hear Roman Reigns on Sam Roberts' show, like, yeah, cool, Roman seems to be a good guy and everything, but like, it just kind of, it doesn't feel like there's any passion there. And then when and there might very well be, but you talk to an independent wrestler and it's there,
Well, yeah. and it's because the independent wrestler is still that fan. They are still a fan, and they're wrestling in front of 10, 12, 50 guys, 50 people, maybe a couple hundred, but they do it because they love it. You know, obviously we were talking earlier and you said, you know, the wrestling that you do now helps put gas in your vehicles. You know, you're not, you obviously have a day job that pays your bills, and you do wrestling because you truly love it. It's something you love doing. You know, and I get a sense oftentimes whenever you hear, you know, like you said, Roman on the Sam Roberts show, that these guys here, they're just making so much money. Now it's like, what else could I do besides maybe go to Hollywood? So they have kind of lost that connection with the fans. And I think that's some of the reason. And of course, TV tapings are set up for you not to have the emotion from the crowd. You know, when you get to go to their house shows, there are more emotions. You get to see the guys relax more. But when there's a camera on them, they're not relaxing. It's a job.
Production.
It's, you know,
because they gotta have that paycheck,
right?
Yeah.
Which I heard something today, which was super cool. We had FTR versus Rock and Roll last night.
Yeah, I saw clips of it. I didn't get to see any of the match.
I have seen clips of it too. Listen, we've seen Ricky and Robert the last 2 years. These guys are doing things at their age that there's guys and young men in the business aren't doing.
Ricky's doing Canadian destroyers.
Yes. And this year he can take a pounding like nobody in the business, right?
Yeah.
And he'll reach his hand out to the crowd. He's getting worked over. He reaches and you can just tell on his face, I need you to help me through with this.
He's just begging.
Yeah.
Begging, please help me. Please help me.
But I talk about that because I don't know if you've seen it or not. Edge came to the show last night.
Oh, really? No, I missed that.
And he tweeted, he said, I had to come check this out. So when you see people like Edge, and I think Edge is a specific because he had it taken away from him.
Yeah.
So he's not taking anything for granted. And he knew that FTR versus Rock and Roll was going to be something special. First time, last time, because they're on their retirement tour. So just the fact that he was there and listening to FTR's responses, I take it there were a lot of boys back in the back that came to watch it. And that kind of reinvigorates me that there are guys that make it to the WWE, make it to AEW, that do actually still care, still are a fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And want the emotion.
Yeah.
It's it's not to brag or anything, but like I get paid, more than a lot of the people I do shows with because of my tenure and, people around Texas, they're aware of me. But like I was never the guy that was just gonna, jump in a car if I'm not booked. Like it's just, and maybe that was a fault of mine back in the day. It wasn't like I did it for, 2010. I was wrestling as much as I could, and like I missed a lot of stuff. So like, yeah, you can offer to pay me what I charge, but like if you don't have something where I can perform like that and give the crowd something like that, then I'm gonna say, hey, thanks, but no thanks, because like that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. If I can't let someone else do, get the crowd on their side like that. Like if you're just gonna have me come in and squash or come in and job, I mean, it's thanks but no thanks, and that's not to be disrespectful or anything. It's just there's no passion there. If I were a younger guy, yeah, maybe, probably I would jump all over those things. But nowadays, it's just I got 2 young kids, and I tell promoters, you got to make it worth me leaving them for hours at a time. You got to make it worth my wife having to put both of them down by herself. So, and because I do care about this business, and if you're going to put me in something that I'm not excited about, if I agree to do that, I feel like I'm cheating the fans because I'm not going to be as into it as, something else. And that's not me saying, hey, give me a title, give me all the headline,
right.
Matches. Like, just let me go and wrestle. Like,
right.
That's all I ever ask. It's just, hey, I'll put over whoever you want. Just let me work with them,
Yeah. And like you said, though, I mean, you've been around Texas for 16 years now.
Yeah.
Fans know who Danny Saint is in that area down there. So if they're paying to come to a show to see Danny Saint, they pretty much know what to expect from a Danny Saint match. And if you go in there and it's not what your normal match is, they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. I totally get that. And I would be the exact same way, going, like, I don't care to wrestle whoever you want me to wrestle, but it needs to be the type of match that I'm accustomed to and my fans are accustomed to.
And it's hard because there's a promotion that I just absolutely love, the Christian Wrestling Federation, and like it's about the ministry there, which it's awesome. But like there were nights that I was showing up, wrestling a 6-minute match, and I was just like, man, I love this place, but that's not worth my night. Like,
Right.
and it's only down the road from me. It's 30 minutes away, but so I'm not traveling home. It's on a long road home, but it's still like, hey, you're going to take time away from my family. I got to have more than a 6-minute match that's really not going to do anything for either of us.
Right.
Either of the people in the ring.
Now, question to play off that, and just because I'm curious, how much influence can the talent have when you show up and they're like, hey, we're giving you, you and Joe Schmo over here, you're going to fight the second, you're in the second match, we're giving you 6 minutes. How much influence can you, now, like, I really need 10 or I really need 15, how much influence can you have over that?
It just depends on where you're at and depends on the booker, really. There's some bookers that's like, hey, we got time limit, we gotta do this, and it's like, okay, I'll do this, but in the future, I'm going to be discussing what you have for me next time you ask me to work.
Right.
Right.
So you had talked earlier that WrestleMania 13, Austin and Bret Hart was kind of what got you hooked, right, as a wrestling fan. So what is your favorite wrestling memory as an in-ring talent?
In 2013, I was just in a bad spot personally. So like I had this feud going with one of my best friends in the business, Christopher Hayden, and the blow off was going to be street fight. And so we had this 4-month build, and then probably about 3 weeks before the blow off street fight match, I was like, man, I think I'm done. Like, I think I gotta take a step back. And at the time I thought, yeah, I'm probably not going to wrestle anymore after this. But it was one of those where it's like, I remember CM Punk saying his match with Taker, he was like, I wrestled that match as if I had a death warrant. Like, and that's how I felt back then. And that was before I ever heard him say that. It was just kind of like, all right, I'm going to go out, and this is the most I'm ever going to give in a match. Because at that moment I was like, I'm not doing this anymore after tonight. And that lasted 15 months maybe. But like, yeah, that's probably my favorite moment match. And I think it's on YouTube actually. It was at Metroplex Wrestling, which is it's really big now here in DFW. But back then it was still pretty up and coming. But yeah, that's the one where I look back, I was like, man, I can honestly say I gave it everything in that match. Trash cans, baseball bats. It was the second time I've ever gigged. I've only gigged twice, bled. I've only done it twice ever. And, for one of my best friends, yeah, I'll do that for you. Yeah,
now,
that was.
It's, you talked about that was with your best friend. We've heard that with, some of the independent guys, some of their favorite matches happen to be with their best friend, guys that you've traveled the road with, that you've formed that bond. I mean, one of Sean's favorite matches is SummerSlam, the unsanctioned match between Triple H and Shawn Michaels after he came back after being away for 4 years. And it's just something about that connection that you and him had, that regardless if you at that point thought it was going to be your last match, that still probably would have been something special. Would you agree?
Yeah. And it was one of those things where me and him, we've worked so many times, we don't have to go over anything ever. Like, it's just like, hey, we got 10, let's go out there. But that was one of those where we actually planned a lot of stuff, and then everything just clicked. because we, the chemistry's always been there. And then once we upped our game, we put on a pretty good match.
So you said you had a 4-month build. How often did you all wrestle to continue building on that? Like, how often does that promotion wrestle?
I think at that time it was twice a month.
Yeah.
If my memory is correct, because they started off as that promotion started off, they were only doing shows once a month.
Yeah.
And then I think it was twice a month at that point.
And that's one of the things that we always talk about, like going back to emotion. A lot of times you don't get enough time to tell the story the right way, right?
Yeah.
So your fans probably were pretty regular fans, and for 4 months they saw you guys going back and forth and building this to getting to the point that when there wasn't the eventual payoff at the street fight, there was a huge amount of emotion, especially for the fans that were invested in that, right? And that is professional wrestling. I mean, that is the definition of it. Tell the story, build the emotion, give the fans what they want. That's it. I mean, and if you do that, it's all great. And that's one of the things, again, not to go back to it, but AEW does a really good job of that. They don't flop the titles around all the time. Champions carry the belts quite a while most of the time.
Yeah.
And I like that part of it. I don't want to see it, and it's almost like everybody's dying to see Roman Reigns lose the belt. We've talked about it uncountable times. There's nobody on the roster right now that can take the belt off of Roman Reigns.
Yeah, that's my opinion too. Like
Yeah.
that was my opinion last year at Mania. I was like, you got to keep that belt on him until at least next Mania.
At this point, I do think him dropping the belt next week at the Rumble to Seth, it infuriating him taking out somebody, interjecting himself into the Rumble, winning the Rumble, and then we get Roman versus Brock at Mania could work. But at this point, the only person that would make a lot of sense to take the belt off of him would be The Rock.
Yeah. And I don't know if you would want to make Rock versus Roman a title match.
Right.
I feel like they're building Rock Roman to next year and when it's in LA.
I've said the same thing.
I said that a dozen
I
times.
said if we're going to get Rock Roman, but it's going to be at LA. Vince isn't wasting that until they get to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right. And when they're in SoFi Stadium with 150,000 people.
Yeah.
So aside from your best friend that you all had that street fight, by the way, who came out on top?
He did. I was originally supposed to, but once I decided, hey, I'm done, like it just made more sense for him now.
Right. So aside from your best friend, who have been some of your favorite opponents inside the squared circle?
There's a guy locally named Brixton Shaw, and me and him, I've never beaten him, but like we've wrestled so many times at this point that he's another one of those where chemistry's there. We don't have to call anything. We'll call, a different finish than, we usually do. But like he's one of those I can go with. We've tagged together. We've tagged against each other off and on since 2018. So like 4 years now that we've just back and forth and developed that chemistry with him. There's this kid named Barrett Brown who's starting to blow up, and he's been doing a lot of the U.S. New Japan shows. He's another one that I get in there with, and he's one of the few where I will put the whole match together backstage because it works. And I'm forgetting people. I'm sure there's others.
Right.
I think of who all I've worked recently. We've been feuding because I'm tag champs at GWF, Global Wrestling Federation, right now, and we've been feuding with this team called the Camachos, and like we're really starting to develop chemistry.
I've seen that name out there somewhere.
The Camachos, yeah.
There's Angel Camacho, who's just massive dude, and then Zarek and Ocho Camacho, and then there's one more.
I may have saw them on the website of that Wrestling for a Cause. Have you heard of that?
Angel works there a lot.
Okay. All right.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure the other two do too.
Well, last week's interview was with Sam Stackhouse.
Okay.
And so he was telling us about that wrestling for a cause. And so
I think Sam
it's-
Stackhouse is actually wrestling Angel Camacho within the next month around this place called King of Sports Wrestling. Like they're doing I think maybe a dog collar match.
Oh wow.
I don't know the build up for it, but I saw the poster for it. They're two massive human beings. So
yeah, Sam's a big guy. Yeah, he was a really good interview. Very, very energetic, and he was like one of them that talked about like some of his favorite matches were against his best friend. So,
yeah, and I've never met him. I don't know him, but like I've had people say he's one of those you should try to get a match with. And I'm like, and I like wrestling the big guys. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, he's really athletic to be a big guy. He does a lot of those.
I've seen some of his stuff. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So, question for you as we're wrapping down here. I know you said that you're probably towards the end of your in-ring career. Do you want to get into the booking side of it whenever you do hang the boots up?
Me and my wife have discussed maybe training. Booking seems so stressful. The amount of people at your feet, kissing your butt, pissed at you. I don't know if it's something I can handle. I would maybe need a booking team if I were going to do something like that. But yeah, we've talked about maybe training.
Yeah.
A while after I'm done. Again, depending on when I'm done, who knows? People are still paying me to wrestle. They're still giving me titles. So,
hey, it's stressful booking these interviews. So I can only imagine trying to booking a promotion and promote it out and stuff like that. Because we started this in July of last year. We've talked about doing it for years. I mean, like 4 years, for as long as we've ever known each other. We talked about doing a podcast together. We talk about it, we forget about it. We talk about it, we forget about it. And we finally just got to the point going, we're either going to do this or let's quit talking about it. So we just made the decision that we started doing it. And so we just recorded I think our 57th show just dropped on Saturday on our regular podcast. And when we came out of WrestleCade weekend, that's when he had talked to you and the young professor on the Roosevelt site. And he goes, man, I got a couple of people that are willing to do interviews with us. And like we had always talked about doing the interviews. But I mean, being dreamers, we were like, anybody gonna want to talk to us? Man, there's a ton of people that want to talk to us. And it's crazy because I mean, we're booking out into March right now. We're doing multiple interviews. We have another interview after you.
nice.
It's really amazing to be able to do that. We've got, we've talking to people about sponsors, and like I said, we're talking to. I just forgot the name of it. I just brought it up a while ago. The Wrestling for the Cause. We're talking to that promotion about working with them because I have a son that has special needs.
Yeah.
And something like that hits home.
Yeah.
And
when my wife was a teacher, she stays at home now, but she was a special needs. She was in the SPED unit at her school.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something, close to our hearts as well.
Well,
Yeah.
that's my daytime job as well. I'm a special education teacher in
Nice.
8th grade. And of course, my wife and I were foster parents. So anytime there's a wrestling for a cause that helps, families in need, that pulls at both of our heartstrings. But also, we enjoy getting to do this because, I mean, we talk about Roman Reigns. I can't imagine what it's like to be Roman Reigns because he's such a ginormous star that he's not even in the same stratosphere as I am. But I can imagine myself being Danny Saint because your story is not that much different than mine. I was a long time, and I was like, I've thought about how long, maybe I should wrestle. One of my lifelong goals is to be a professional wrestling referee. It's been that for as long as I can remember. But I feel like, and I'm sure these megastars are the same way, but I feel like we have more in common. And I think that builds with the emotion that you get at these indie shows, is because you're a guy that has to work a 9-to-5 job Monday through Friday, and you get to wrestle on the weekends. Sometimes it helps, add additional money. Sometimes it's just fun, but you still have the struggles, the everyday struggles of that we have, or that the crowd has, and I think that really helps feed into that emotion.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I've had a rough week. I'm getting in the ring, and there's a release there, and I feel like people sitting in the crowd have that same thing. It's like, hey, I've had a rough week. I'm gonna go watch this thing I enjoy.
Yeah,
and that's what I hype myself up with before every show. It's like, hey, I have no idea what these people are going through. Christian Wrestling Federation, we get way more in depth with what people are going through, what we as wrestlers are going through. That there's transparency there. It's like, hey, I went through this.
yeah,
I try to be as transparent as possible with everyone. A lot of people know a lot of my struggles. And because if it can help one person get through their day, whether I'm telling my story, whether I'm wrestling, I'm here for it.
right. No, and I mean that you to a lot of people, even though you're like just Danny Saint independent wrestler, you can be that larger than life person. And
it's weird because my pro wrestling tee sales have like been big the last 4 months, and it's like, man, I don't get it, but I'm doing something right for somebody.
And being able to connect with people at that Christian wrestling, and maybe, like you said, tell your story, hear their story as fellow Christians. The number one thing you can be is supportive as a Christian.
Yes.
And for someone else to know that, hey, he went through that too, and he came through it, and he's better for it. I still have hope. And
I mean, you're using your talents and your abilities to witness to people. That's at the base, at the root of everything. That's essentially what you're doing. You're like, well, if Danny can do that, then I can too.
right.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I look past my wrestling career, is like, hey, how can I be involved with that, federation ministry, that part of all of this? Because Christian Wrestling Federation starting to bring in guys that I've known for years, had no idea about any of their life stories, like any of their personal struggles. So that's the really cool thing, is getting to know what some of these guys that I've known since I started, that I couldn't have told you these stories they went through. So that's one of my favorite parts about what I'm doing right now, working there.
Well, I wrote that Christian Wrestling Federation down because that sounds like somebody that we need to reach out to as well.
Yeah,
I may reach out to you to, if we need help contacting,
oh yeah, absolutely. I'm texting with the booker all the time. He's
awesome.
he's got his own story,
Sweet.
And, his story's got, valleys that he went through. We're all
so before we ask you our last question, Danny, I want anybody that's listening out there, how can they find Danny Saint? Are you out there on social media?
Yeah, I'm on everything. I'm Center Stage DS on Twitter, because at one point I was Center Stage Danny Saint, and when I started Twitter, that's what I went with, and I'm just too stubborn to change my name anymore. So I've got a Facebook page, Danny Saint. I'm on Instagram as Let There Be Saint. I have a YouTube. There's not a whole lot of wrestling on there. It's just me kind of goofing off, and I don't even know the URL to that one, to be honest. It's not, there's not a whole lot of wrestling related stuff on there. ProWrestlingTees.com/Danny Saint. I think that's everything.
Okay, cool.
Fantastic. Well, Danny, what I told you about our show, our Saturday shows, we do fantasy booking. Okay. So we go back in history, pull out some top moments in history, and then we rewrite them.
For example, our very first episode was based off the 92 Rumble, and if Hogan had turned heel in 92, like the fans wanted him to. When you go back and listen to interviews and stuff, the fans were turning on him then. So our very first episode was fantasy booking, what that may have looked like.
Yeah. So of course, there's no right or wrong reasons. And then here recently, we have started doing. We're basically fantasy booking an entire pay-per-view. We did a top 50 on one of our shows, and so we're taking those top 50 guys from their prime, and we're fantasy booking pay-per-views. So just silly stuff that we're growing. We wanted something different. Everybody does this week in WWE, this week in AEW. We wanted something that nobody else does. And I'm pretty sure there ain't nobody out there fantasy booking stuff the way we do.
Yeah.
But that being said, on Wednesdays, we do the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. So what we started the whole concept of the show is we put a whole bunch of topics on a spinning wheel and it just random selected a topic each week. And we would do the Mount Rushmore of that. Heels, faces, males, females, title belts, tag teams, factions, theme songs, all that stuff. So, and then we did a top 50 and we did a countdown, a 10-week countdown. So the last question we always like to ask our guests you've been a wrestling fan for a long time. Who is your Mount Rushmore of wrestling? Whether that be you think of all time greatest, blah, 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 or the top 4 guys that influenced you in wrestling. However you want that to be. But who would be
I'll give you my top 4 favorites because I don't think they're the same as anybody else. Like some people have these guys, but so number 1, first and foremost, Bret Hart. I thought he's the best forever. The reason I wanted to become a wrestler. Second is The Rock because he just was a superstar, outside of wrestling. He was one of those guys that you're like, I kind of want to be that guy with his glasses and his silk shirts, which is funny that Roosevelt's is because I always wear a Roosevelt's shirt to a show now. Like I don't wear anything else to a show. And that was one of those guys like, man, he's a superstar.
Yeah.
And then 3 is Eddie Guerrero because he's just the best. He's he didn't have a bad match with anybody.
Right.
And I'm still sad about his death. I haven't gotten over it yet. And then number 4 is Taz.
Nice.
Because he's just one of those badasses that was like, you're not walking out of this ring, you're crawling, you're injured. And he was what started me watching ECW and watching go back and watching past ECW. And he opened my whole ECW world is because someone showed me a match with Taz. And I don't even remember. I think it was one of the Taz and Bam Bam matches, the way he would just throw Bam Bam around. It's like, man, I want more of that guy.
Yeah.
And I steal a lot of Taz's old school moves in my moveset too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taz also is one of my favorites. I hate that his WWE run went the way it did.
Yeah, me too.
I think injuries had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But man, did he discover a second career behind the mic? He was good. He was good at the announce table.
Yeah. And I remember him saying he had that same neck injury that Austin had, that Benoit had, and he was just like, I just wasn't willing to get the surgery. That was it for me. But because it's the anniversary of his WWE debut yesterday or today, I think,
right.
And people were tweeting him, and he was tweeting about it, and I remember that night. I was like, man, that was awesome.
Well,
even though most of us ECW fans, Taz fans, knew that's who all those teaser videos were for, it was still very awesome to see Madison Square Garden roof blowing off when his face showed up on the Titantron during the entrance music.
Well, and he beat Kurt Angle in his first match.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah, for sure. Well, Danny, you'll have to go check out our podcast. We actually did a tribute to Eddie on one of our shows where we spent the majority of an hour just talking about Eddie Guerrero, what we loved about him, what we miss about him. And we might have done a little bit of fantasy booking with it, but most of it was just memories. And it's so funny. We did zero prep for that show. because we're both huge fans of Eddie.
Yeah.
It all
I can
just
imagine. I
rolled
feel
right
like I
out.
would be the same way.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he's one of those guys that, like, if he were still alive at the age he would be at now, he would still be the best, one of the top 3 guys on the WWE roster if he were still
No doubt.
there. Like,
No doubt.
and he would still be outperforming everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, Danny, we have certainly appreciated the time with you tonight.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Awesome. Folks, go out and follow and find Danny out there on social media. Follow him, give him a like. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, go watch some of those independent shows down there. And
please come say hi.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love talking to people.
Well, Danny, we look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, me too.
And we definitely have appreciated the time. So thanks for joining us here on From Corner.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was great.
All right, bud. Until the next time.
See you.